Hi, I'm Norm Rodrigue, and I'm creating video documentaries about Augusta's vintage restaurants from the mid-20th century. One of those restaurants, located on Riverside Drive in the O'Connor's Motors parking lot, was a small one-man hot dog stand known as Bolley's Famous Franks. Nelson Janess, more popularly known as Bolley, started that one-man hot dog stand in the late 50s. Remarkably, Bolley's is still operating today after more than 6 decades. Bolley's later expanded at the site to a slightly larger takeout restaurant with outdoor covered seating. I remember it well. I started working at Bolley's in 1963, my freshman year at Tony. It was my first real job. I learned how to cook, count, make change, and get along with the public, skills that stayed with me throughout my life. I earned enough money to buy my first set of wheels, a small Honda motorcycle. Back then, hot dogs were 20 cents, French fries 15, hamburgers 30, and a lobster roll, at Bolley's at least, 35 cents. Those days are long gone. In 1971, Bolley's moved to its present location in Hollowell and expanded its menu to include breakfast and provided indoor seating. Lots of people worked at Bolley's over the years, but one of the best known is Jim Whitten, a longtime cook at Bolley's who went on to chef at several country clubs in Maine and an international resort. Let's hear from Jim and Bolley's daughters Sue Janess and Elizabeth Tanguay. And finally, let's talk to Dawn and Kimberly Pooler, the current owners of Bolley's. One last thing. Stick around until the end of the story and I'll tell you how Bolley got his nickname and how he got started in the hot dog business.
It was when my father started the business. I was born in 1957, and my understanding is he started the business shortly after I was born. I'm not sure the exact date or year rather, but all I remember is my father working. I remember Sundays were really quiet because he was working, but that was the way of life back then. I don't think it was just my father. I think it was the French people and the people in our community.
I actually ate a Bolley hot dog today for the first time in maybe 4 or 5 years, and I was talking to my wife, and she said, "You miss those hot dogs?" I said, "Linda," I ate 2 hot dogs a day for my lunch for almost 10 years. I said, "I don't miss them." I had a pretty big fill of Bolley hot dogs in my life. I said, it tasted great today, but if I don't have another one for 5 years, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. A good man to work with, and some of he would yell. He'd been in the Marine Corps, and he figured that was as good a way to handle people as any, being a drill sergeant. And most of the time it worked. Sometimes I'd kick back and say, "Hey, boy, what are you talking? That ain't gonna." What? I stayed for 9 years, so I must have liked it. I worked up from French fry guy to grill guy, and finally I got to be hot dog guy. And Bolley was a lefty, and I was a lefty, so it was set up perfectly for me. Guys that were right-handed had a little problem trying to do the things you needed to do because they had to reach over, whereas being a lefty, it just came really naturally for me. Bolley was always the guy. Even when I got done, I always said that if I had needed $500 for anything, I could have gone to Bolley and said, "Bolley, I really need some money," and he would have just said, "How much?" and "Don't worry about paying me back until you get it." So he was a really good guy, and I can't say enough about him and his family. It was really a kind of a pleasure to work there.
I'll try not to cry. Dad fed the homeless and took care of a lot of people that were in need, and Sue has a remarkable story of that. Okay. You do? When you were a little girl, you tell me that when Dad died, you used to bring groceries to somebody's house. You used to go with Dad somewhere. Yeah,
I did.
You told me that when Dad died, and you didn't know where you were going, but he would bring groceries.
Oh.
In 1971, I believe, he had decided O'Connor Motors was moving into where he had his original stand, and he was going to move to Hollowell. And he said, he saw me one day and said, "Hey, I'm looking for new help in Hollowell. You want to work?" And I said, "Sure." I'd always liked cooking, so I went to work for Bolley in Hollowell. in 1971, and I was there except for a brief stint till 1980. He liked to bet. He was always, he'd bet on about anything if you mentioned it. He'd bet on football game. He'd do anything. He just liked that action. But, but again, he was a very generous guy. I mean, I've seen people come in and, talk to him for a minute, and you'd see him pull out some money, and I didn't know who they were, but he'd give them some money, and off they go. And like I said, I'm sure in most of those cases, he didn't expect to be paid back. It's just that guy. So I'm trying to think of any. Of course, Bolley became an early adapter to when the scratch tickets first came to Maine. Bolley got a thing so he could sell scratch tickets, and within a couple of months, he was one of the top sellers in the state of Maine. And the reason was he was buying a couple $100 a day worth of his own scratch tickets. And he'd sit there and he'd scratch them, and he'd go out and buy $20 more, and he'd scratch them, and he'd win. He won $20 today, and I'm going, geez, Bolley, you just spent $200 to win $20, but that didn't mean anything to him. It was the fact, just the fact that he won $20. And I think he kept them for quite a while, and then he just decided. I think his wife may have helped him too. Decide that spending $200 a day on scratch tickets to win $20 wasn't a winning there wasn't much profit in that. So eventually he got rid of him because he was also his own worst enemy in that case.
My mother was co-owner of Bolley's, and whatever decision was to be made in terms of the restaurant, they did together. It had to be that way. It didn't have to be, but that's the way it was, and it's just like a marriage. And they had a partnership in marriage, and they had a business partnership, and my mother would take care of the bookkeeping. She would run errands, whatever my father needed. If he needed some, to go to the bank, oftentimes he needed some change, and she would do that. She would fill in. She worked part-time at lunch. I remember when I was working there, we would work together at lunchtime.
And when his daughter got married, I closed up for him so he could go to the wedding, and he slipped me $100 tip just for doing that, just for closing that night, kind of thing. And it was good. It was a good place to work. His family was great. I'm still friends with both his daughters, and we had a good working relationship.
Yeah.
I have to say one thing that people probably don't know about my father is he always wanted to own a Dairy Queen. We would come
an ice cream store, yes. But Dairy Queen.
It was the one on Bango Street.
Yeah.
And I'd come back with him from Belfast, with him and my mother, and he would comment about, he loved ice cream.
He did.
As a child, Bolley was sent away to spend the summer with his relatives in Quebec. There he learned how to play marbles. In French Quebec, marbles was called boules, B-O-U-L-E-S. Also, the French word for balls. He loved playing marbles, and as a kid, growing up on Sand Hill, he asked all his friends to play boules. It became his nickname and was anglicized to become Bolley, a nickname he kept his entire life. You're probably wondering how Bolley got started in this business. When Bolley finished his tour of duty in the Marines during the Korean War era, he returned to Augusta and got a job as a bread delivery man for Pomelo's Bakery, a small regional bakery located on Sand Hill. Bolley's delivery route took him all the way to the mid-coast, including Rockland. One of Bolley's stops was Wass's Hot Dogs in Rockland, where he noticed they purchased a large amount of Pomelo's hot dog rolls. Bolley saw an opportunity and talked them into giving him their secret hot dog formula, on the condition that he would never compete with them in the Rockland area. He kept his word, and both Bolley's and Wass's are still selling hot dogs to this day.
My name's Donald Pooler. I work I own Bolley's Famous Frank in Augusta, Maine. I've been here over 40 years.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Pooler, and I'm Donald Pooler's wife, and I'm co-owner with him, and I've been here for, 22, maybe 23 years.
We moved from Waterville to Hollowell back in 3rd grade. We lived right next door to Bolley's, I used to come over here all the time after school, get a donut, whoopie pie, chocolate melt. And when I went to high school, I had a chance to work over here. I worked for Bolley for like 15 years, and then he gave me the opportunity to buy the place from him, own a finance, and I had it all paid off in 12 and a half years.
Back when I was in high school, you know, I was at that age where I wanted to have my own money. So I applied to a bunch of places. And I remember, it's funny because I remember when I was younger, I was like, I don't want to work in a restaurant. And my mom's like, well, you need to get some experience applying for jobs. Just apply everywhere. And I applied for a bunch of places, but I got the one call back from Bolley. Started when I was 16 and worked here for, you know, all through high school, and decided to go full time. When we started working closer together, we became really good friends, and friends led to, you know, dating, and here I am.
Here we are.
Yeah. We got married in 2010.
Yeah.
We got married on New Year's Eve, so we had a really big party.
Bolley was a very tough guy to work for. You would have to listen what he tells you to do, and you do it, and if you don't do it, he'll let you know it. He was like a father to me. You know, he went to my wedding, pretty close. When I first took over, we had about 8 people working full time, and I was working about 120 hours a week, for 7 days a week, for 12 and a half years, till I got the place paid off. After we got the place paid off, we said, okay, it's time to maybe take clothes for a day or two. I had my sister work for me, and my brother work for me. He's still with me. And then my wife's sisters, all 3 of them worked. All 4 of them worked here.
All 4 of my sisters have worked here at one point.
Yeah.
My mom came in and worked for us. My niece has worked for us for a long time. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we've tried our hardest to do is just to stay true to the Bolley's recipe. I mean, he always, you know, spoke and said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know, there's no need to try to keep up with the trends, or, you know, do what you're good at. And so we've been really strict at staying with, you know, keeping everything original.
Yeah,
The
same
hot dogs are the same
recipes.
way. Fries are cooked fresh every day. Donuts are a big seller, which we make fresh every morning. So yeah, that's what I mean, and it's done well for us. To, you know, customers want consistency when they come to Bolley's. They know what they're going to get. You know, when people come in here, this is a family restaurant, so we try to make you feel like family, and a lot of times they do the same thing back. And we've learned that the most during the hard times, the support we've gotten from people. And then when we do say, oh, you know, because when we decided to close down on that one day, and then we decided to close down on the weekend, we thought we were going to get it from our customers, but they weren't. They were like, good for you, you deserve it. Because we have a lot of elderly customers that come in, sometimes 2-3 times a day, and some of them spend a good hour and a half here. You know, they meet their friends, and there are people that have met in the restaurant that didn't know each other, and now they're like family. We have certain times of the day where you get certain groups, and one year, you know, my sister-in-law and I were like, you know, watching customers come in, and we're thinking, you know, these people probably have nowhere to go on Thanksgiving. You know, what are they going to do? And we closed down on that. At that point, we only closed down 3 days a year, and we actually stayed open until 10:30 on Thanksgiving and then closed down. But so we started like a month before Thanksgiving handing out these little papers that said you're invited to a private, you know, Thanksgiving dinner, and come at this time and this time. And so we would see, you know, some of our regulars, or even some customers that came in that looked kind of lonely, and so we invited them all over, and on Thanksgiving Day, they just started showing up. We had about 20 people. We made all kinds of turkey, vegetables. We set up a buffet and sat down and had one of the best Thanksgiving dinners we've ever had. Our milkman came, Warren Brewer, who was a really good friend of ours. But you get really close with customers. There was
like family.
I mean, there were a lot of family gatherings and things that we weren't able to go to because we, you know,
Had to work.
We had to put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this place.
Yeah.
But it was worth every second. It really
Yeah.
was. Pretty much all I've known, and I've loved every second. I don't think I'd change it at all. I mean, I think the good thing about when you own a business and you're working as a family, you know, a lot of people that are working together, they go off to their own jobs, and if you work a lot, then you don't see your family as much. And we were able to spend
work together.
Yeah, we spent time together. Our son is, been a part of our restaurant, his whole life, and I wouldn't change a thing, would you?
I wouldn't.
I mean, even with the tough times.
Yeah. I wouldn't change nothing.